My name is Don Parrish. I live in Bardstown, Kentucky. I was always in business for myself. Spent 37 years in the concrete block business. Spent another 18 years with a combination bookstore and candy store. I was interrupted in 1968 while I was a member of the Kentucky Army National Guard. And we wound up going to Texas for about 6 months, trained on new equipment. And then in October of 68, we left for Vietnam. We were an artillery firing battery, Charlie Battery, 2nd Battalion, 138th Field Artillery. We were in Acor, which is up close to the DMZ, not real close, but within a few miles of the DMZ. And we fired artillery support for the 101st Airborne. While we were there, we had a good many missions. We fired something just shy of 50,000 rounds in a year, and that's 155 howitzer, and it was a self-propelled unit. We had some defensive combat situations. The one that was particularly devastating was on June the 19th, 1969, when a battalion of sappers overran us and killed 14 Americans, and I think there's 8 of us that managed to escape with no wounds at all. I was awarded the Bronze Star with a V device, which is, I'm sure, plenty high enough for what I was involved in. We had only one person in the entire battalion that was awarded anything higher than that, and that was a Silver Star that went to our medic. He had 44 wounded people he had to deal with, along with some from the 101st Airborne, who had a platoon up on top of the hill. We spent a year in Vietnam, and at October of '69, we packed up and came home. Got a call one day from a fellow who was in my fire directions center. He was my assistant there, as a matter of fact. And he said he had heard from a guy by the name of Chuck Reed. And he said, why don't we go meet him together? I think we wound up going to Taylorsville to meet him. We carried on quite a bit of a discussion then. And next thing I know, I was invited on a trip to fish for walleye, my favorite kind of fishing, in Lake Erie. Shortly thereafter, I was invited to go to Alaska. That is the bucket trip for anybody. Okay, I plan to work with them as long as I can, helping any way I can to expand their numbers of people. In fact, Chuck and I were talking about that yesterday, about me getting several of my guardsmen involved. Had done that once before. We had 6 of us that made a trip to Lake Erie, and then some of those people, was another group of 6 of us wound up going to Alaska. I don't know very many fishermen in my outfit, so fishing is the one area that I know a great deal about. I'm not a deer hunter, and that is it's another opportunity that is, from what I can understand, really a wonderful opportunity. And I'd be happy to mention that to anybody and get them to come along as well. Kentucky Wounded Heroes is a very worthwhile organization. It brings people together who have had similar experiences. And the one thing I find, which is a pretty common line, is that the majority of these people will not talk about their experiences in battle unless a group like this gets together. And this helps to bring out conversations that otherwise just don't take place. In my case, I know, for example, that my family, they may be curious about what I did and about what happened in my watch, but at the same time, there's no way I can properly explain to them the fears and the whole experience unless they had been there, and obviously they have not. So it really makes it tough to make that conversation unless there's an audience who has had similar experiences. Well, I've always been a fisherman, and I guess the best thing that's happened from the perspective of membership here has been fishing experiences, which I thoroughly appreciate. Hope they keep coming. But beyond that, the opportunity to speak to some of my fellow comrades who have been involved in similar circumstances to mine in other places has been quite valuable to me. There's not a day goes by that I don't think about my experiences. And I find that it is helpful to carry on those conversations with others who have been there. I know that these trips are pretty expensive, and there's a good bit of money that is contributed toward the experiences that Chuck Reed and his staff have put together. It is a very worthy 501c3 organization, but it's very worthy of your gift dollars if you're in a position to make something like that happen. Highly recommend it. You'll never be sorry you did.